So there are still thousands of barrels of oil spewing into the Gulf of Mexico from the Deep Horizons well tonight. One critical question is, what kind of oil is doing the spewing? Of course, it's all bad when you're talking about a spill, but some of it is less bad and some of it is more bad. I visited the man in charge of figuring out what exactly is polluting the Gulf and threatening the shore. Together, he and I looked at actual oil from this spill. It was a pretty amazing thing to see and an awesome illustration of applied geekiness in an actual chem lab. This is our second day here in Louisiana covering the ongoing oil disaster in the Gulf. Today we drove to Baton Rouge. We're here at LSU, or one of the analytical labs at the School of Coast and the Environment, because Dr. Edward Overton, who's an emeritus professor of environmental sciences here at LSU, has a ton of experience in advising both on oil spills and on the response to oil spills. And he's one of the people who has been sent samples of what has actually spilled in the Gulf to assess what that is. Oil is not just oil, is not just oil. It matters what exact type of oil that is in terms of what the overall impact is going to be, what techniques are available to clean it up, and really how devastating this is going to be. So we're here in Dr. Edward Overton's lab to learn a little bit more about what exactly is continuing to flow into the Gulf at the rate of tens of thousands of gallons a day. Dr. Overton, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I especially don't want to take too much time away from what you're doing because it's so important to the response. But when did you get your first samples of what was actually spilling into the Gulf?
Well, we got it about a week ago this Monday. So we've had we had a moose sample from the Gulf, and then we've got some wellhead oil a couple of 3 days later than that.
And I understand that when you got that first sample, you were very concerned about what was in that sample, about what that said about what type of oil that was. Can you show us that sample? Can you tell us what concerned you about it?
Well, this is a subset of that sample, and you can see it has the consistency of roof tar.
Yeah.
And crude coming out of that zone in the Gulf, that production zone, should be much more fluid, and as is typical South Louisiana crude.
Do you have an example of what would be typical of South Louisiana crude, just so we can compare it?
This is a normal oil from the production zones in this area.
Okay.
It's called South Louisiana crude, low sulfur, low aromatic type crude, and again, a very high quality crude. And the first samples I saw were something like this, which really started to alarm us that there may be something unique about what's going on out there.
Now, you've received subsequent samples after this, though, that aren't quite that thick.
That are not quite as thick as this. These are some of the samples that actually came off of skimmers that were cleaning up the oil spill, and notice it's kind of the reddy brown color. Crude oil is typically black, as this South Louisiana crude. So you can see the difference in the tint. And this is an oil and water emulsion called a mousse, chocolate mousse, if you will. And it is what's in most of the oil in the Gulf right now is in this form, and it's floating around and undergoing environmental change, weathering.
Now, is it possible that what's coming out of the seabed, again, a mile down, is a few different types of material? That we've got some of this, we've got some of this, we've got different types of oil that are coming out there, and some of the spill may actually be this very hard to deal with, high asphaltene, durable oil?
I doubt it. There's some speculation that that's occurring, but of course this is all coming out of one pipe, and you know, way down in the ground it was kind of mixed together. So I doubt it, but I really don't have a good explanation for that first sample. So we're still trying to understand. We're dealing early on into a long-term event. So we're in the first 2 weeks of probably a 9-month affair here, trying to clean up and affect this spill, understand the effects of this spill.
You say 9 months. Is that because you think it's going to take 9 months to stop that well from making?
I think it's going to take 3 to 6 unless these cement barriers that they're trying work, and we hope and pray they will. But to drill a relief well is very difficult to do, and so you've got to drill down and intersect the damaged pipeline and cut it in half and stop it like that. And you can imagine the difficulty of doing something like that. So worst case is they won't be able to use these cement structures, and we will have a spill of some magnitude until the well is capped and shut off below the surface. And that is not a very pretty picture in terms of the amount of oil Right now, we're so early, we don't know the ultimate fate, but that's why we're getting samples to try to understand what happens. Ultimately, some of this stuff will, the environment it'll evaporate, and microbes will eat off a lot of the chemical structure, and you'll be left with something that's tarry like this. We just don't want most of it to be tarry like that.
So, Dr. Overton, you're part of a scientific support team, essentially, for National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA.
That's right.
They send you these samples about what's spilling in the Gulf. You're analyzing it to figure out exactly what it is. What happens to your findings? How is your research used in terms of the containment cleanup effort?
Well, we do these tests and write up a little summary of our understanding of what's going on, and we pass it along to the group in NOAA that's providing scientific advice to the Coast Guard.
Okay. And again, this is just your advice that you're giving. It's not, you can't give me the comprehensive answer in terms of what the Coast Guard is receiving from everybody, but in terms of what you're seeing, the bottom line is obviously you got to keep it off the coast, and you think that this can be dispersed.
It's Mother Nature is dispersing it. I mean, it's floating around. Some of it is going to get on shore. There's just almost no doubt about that, depending on the wind and wave conditions. How much of an impact is still remains to be seen. The worst case is pretty bad.
The threat of getting to that worst case scenario, though, is the likelihood of that affected by just the quantity of how much oil is spilled?
Right. The more you put in there, the better the chances are that some of it in the circulation patterns of this zone are going to impact the coastline. So the sooner we can stop the flow, of course, the better, much better. The next best thing is keeping it offshore to the extent we can. And then the last chain of attack is seeing what you can do to keep it as it gets near shore. Deflection booms and things like this. Those are not particularly effective in wave action. So the best thing we can do is keep it offshore to the extent possible.
Well, first thing we got to do is cap that well.
That's right. Absolutely. Cap the well.
In terms of the overall timeline under which this is unfolding, you said that you think you can reasonably expect that it's going to take months to drill a relief well. That may be the only way to cap this well. And that, of course, is horrifying. One of the things that's scary about that is it's May right now. Hurricane season starts in June. What's the combination of a big storm and a big spill mean? Are you worried? Is there reason to worry about hurricane season on the horizon here?
Well, you always worry about a hurricane season, period. Everybody down here.
Sure.
But in terms of the spill, of course, you'll have to cease offshore operations. So everything offshore will have to come ashore if a storm is looming. But a hurricane is Mother Nature's dispersants. I mean, it is just so much energy in such a short period of time that for a while, right after the spill, oil will look like it's gone. Now, it hasn't gone, of course, it's just spread out, but it's just an incredible amount of energy in a short period of time, and that disperses the oil. So, and again, concentrated oil is bad, dispersed oil is not good, but better than concentrated oil. So hurricanes have their good and their bad. It would be nice to have a nice mild hurricane, get to disperse a lot of oil, but not cause much coastal damage.
You described this recently as having the qualities of Category 5 hurricane. Do you think that ultimately this spill could do as much damage as a storm that big?
It certainly could. Will it? I mean, you know, we're into possibilities versus probabilities, and right now it's hard to predict how bad it's going to be. It could be extremely devastating, but it may not be. And a lot depends on factors which we simply can't control, weather, the natural dispersal. Again, it's just starting now. We've only been doing this for 2 weeks, so we don't know how quick that oil is being removed from the environment, what's happening to it. All of those are issues that we are just starting to try to figure out.
Plus capping that well.
Plus that well, capping the well is the first thing.
Yeah.
But there's nothing we can do about that. That's BP and the engineers.
Yeah. Dr. Edward Overton, Professor Emeritus of Environmental Sciences here at LSU. This has been really, really helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Now get back to work. We need you.
I hate to go look at my answering machine.
Sorry. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
One reasonable reaction to a horrifying out-of-control oil disaster is to consider the possibility that the way we've been dealing with oil as a nation has some problems, maybe should be reconsidered. Another possible reaction is to call for more drilling right now. It takes all kinds, and we have both kinds coming up on the show next.